Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again with a whole video from start to finish of a character of Blade Trap. Basically kind of sped run the mapping to late game just because really still not in love with the trapping playstyle. So I absolutely love the idea of Blade Trap itself. Essentially it is a trap that is an attack, so it scales entirely off of your weapons that you are either single wielding or dual wielding. And then they spin around in a circle, and yeah, it's basically just scaled as an attack. So you need to go for attack damage, crit multi, accuracy, all that shit, and then in turn you just throw traps and they utilize your weapon's damage. So I still really like the idea of Blade Trap, and I wanted to build around it again since last time I played it like a year ago or some shit, and I wanted to go ahead and do dex stacking for this character. Last time I did dagger with a whole bunch of flat, all kinds of damage, abyssal jewel stacking. So as you can see, it can get pretty screen cancery if you are using certain MTX, because it copies whatever weapons you're holding. So it's not the weapon effects, but rather the weapons themselves. So if you change your swords to look like some other type of swords, there's a chance that whatever it's spinning around will have some sort of cool trail that eventually just leads to not being able to see anything. So kind of cool stuff, but it does get a little bit old not being able to see things. And then you try and search for just the least offensive blade trap possible. And just no MTX is typically that, or something like Scourge MTX isn't too bad. Either way, so the character is a saboteur using 2 dex stacking swords, so 2 to 4 cold damage per 10 dexterity, and then I just went ahead and stacked a whole bunch of dexterity on the character. So it's basically entirely cold based, and it's just very much a trapping playstyle, which I'm not in love with. Like, the delay, the stutter stepping, the throwing some traps, the waiting for things to die. So the mapping really isn't for me. I got to level 92 almost and just went, whatever. Was kind of just like speed running through maps so I could start doing some bossing. Because the bossing is where a trapper really does start to shine, and that's because you can just like preload basically all of your damage before a boss comes out a lot of the time. Though there will be bosses that, basically you start against immediately, and then with the existence of uber bosses, that does mean that you can't necessarily, or multi-phase bosses, you can't necessarily preload and just kill something quickly because you have to do multiple phases, and that's where it kind of starts to fall a bit more short. So this is my first Maven attempt on this character, just seeing my damage testing, seeing how it's like. If you're unaware, there are cold dex boots now that do 2 to 4 cold damage per 10 dexterity on your boot mod. So it's like the weapon mod, but it's to, it's more global, so it's to both weapons. And on top of that, it is a sentinel mod and quite a bit harder to get. So this is prior to doing those boots. So I wanted to make the entire character without those boots as just using hunter weapons and see where it takes me. And ultimately, I don't think it took me that far. Like it can do Endgame by all means. So I killed like a bunch of tier 16 map bosses, killed Maven, killed a whole bunch of shit, and then tried Uber Maven, and that's where it just, for this type of shit, you need more damage if you're going to have this type of a playstyle without being truly a pretty thick character. And as you can tell, I'm kind of a thin character. Do have like sub 4k life, got like 90% evasion and the blind nodes from Saboteur and good regen and all that, but that's just still not very thick ultimately. Cap spell suppress as well, and it's not quite enough to really go toe-to-toe with the Uber bosses continuously, so I felt like I needed more damage to be able to do some clean Uber killing. So up until the Ubers and just regular endgame, then having no dex stack boots with this type of setup is fine, but I wanted to then push the limits and see what the dex stack boots would feel like. So after that Uber Maven that I failed, I did make the dex stack boots. So I just bought the base. Someone was selling the blue base for 7 exalts. I then just finish them off from there, and I'll go over that in a sec. And that means that I almost doubled my damage of my character. just thanks to the boot mod. For about seven or eight exalts, we doubled our damage, and it did take me to another level. And then this is an example of Maven with the boots, and you can basically global her, and most endgame just gets pretty much globaled. It's still probably not going to really be enough to enjoy doing Uber fights, so I didn't even bother trying again after that. I don't think the playstyle is quite there with the semi-squishiness and not quite over the top DPS, so I didn't really try the Ubers. But for regular endgame content, yeah, you can blow stuff up. We did some 4-ways, did some Cirrus, Maven, Elder, you know, bunch of stuff, and it's okay. So I wasn't in love with it, and this is just another attempt at Blade Trap. I think doing like an Omni version would be insane, and many other things could go pretty crazy, but this time around, it was just okay, and it could kill some bosses, and it was kind of fun to put together. So can't really truly recommend it, but if you like what you see, either way, I will show you how I built the character up till now. So here's the character, currently level 91, on the way to 92, then started doing some bossing and shit. Spin my dex right round the Saboteur, and of course based around dex stacking, so 2 to 4 cold damage per 10 dexterity, and it's on some pretty slow swords because attack speed doesn't scale Blade Trap. So I just went ahead and grabbed some Harpy Rapiers, and then did some essence crafting, just shrieking essences of cold until I hit the dex mod, and then finished them off however I needed to. So they both had like empty prefixes, and I just went with a lock prefix, unveil, veil orb, and this one worked out pretty well because the prefix got picked as the penetration for the veil, and then I could just finish it off however I wanted, whereas this one, basically nothing happened to the prefix, and then I just got the double damage focus, and I just crafted that on myself. So pretty easy stuff to craft those, just a little bit of starting capital required. But Blade Trap itself does scale off of dual wield pretty nicely. So if you dual wield, it rotates an extra time. By default, it rotates 4 times. And then there's also rotation speed, which just is essentially DPS as long as you keep throwing traps and keep things in your traps. So that's kind of what it looks like. Pretty good area once it starts leveling up with radius, and I think it does help with your weapon range. So swords are going to be slightly better than like daggers and stuff like that. And then the helm enchant can also give you Blade Trap rotates +1 time. So with all that together, we end up having an okay sort of setup for dual wield, and then dex stacking. And as you can see, all of our cold damage is basically entirety of our damage. Now, I'm not entirely sure if the boots are currently bugged or what's happening here, but as you can see, when we hover over my damage, 2 to 5,000, basically both weapons, and then it does say 2 to 4 cold damage to attacks per 10 dexterity, so that should work dual wield. And then putting them on, you can see it's, by the looks of it, only applying to the main hand. So not entirely sure what's happening there. I'm pretty sure POB is showing that it's basically working for both. Maybe it's working for both, but it's not necessarily showing up as on the tooltip. Either way, it was a noticeable, sizable DPS increase putting these boots on. So you can like try and make them yourself with a fuck ton of boots and sentinel smashes, and then have the mod and go from there. Like I said, just then picked up a blue pair that had only that mod, and then just finished them off. So I then orged them, regaled them. Since I didn't get a bad prefix or a prefix at all, it just regaled a suffix, I could then do multi-mod. I then put life and movement speed cannot chill, and then just did a chaos, Eldritch Chaos for the suffixes, and then like did some add remove suffixes with the Eldritch Annul and what are we talking? Eldritch Annul and Exalts. So thanks to all these Eldritch currencies, I could basically make what is essentially a very nice boot for not that much with just using the base. So 7 Exalt base, probably another 1 Exalt worth of Eldritch currencies, and then 2 Exalts worth of mods, so 10x boots in the end. And I mean, they're worth every penny for the deck stacking builds because they will pretty much double your output. So insane boots to get for the cold dex stack spectral throw that I created last league. And is absolutely going off this league. I've seen some very insane examples of it. Probably one of the better builds out there for a certain budget. But this example of a cold deck stack, look, it was okay. I really can't truly recommend it because, I don't know, the trap playstyle felt a bit weird and I didn't feel like I got enough DPS for the amount of investment I went in. Whereas if you did like just a regular seismic trap saboteur, you'd probably have still a very similar playstyle, similar sort of outcome with how you're doing the entire thing, but then I'm pretty sure you'd get more output out of it for less hassle, because putting together a dex or a stacking stat character is a little bit of a pain and a little bit of a currency massacre. So we've got that. Just did some smashing of some chests, so pretty simple stuff with the recombinators, just trying to smash some chests that have some dex mods, some life mods, some crit mods, and in the end the best thing that basically happened was this guy, and it's just life, dex, and then I crafted the attribute, but I was going for attacks have crits for a 1.5 because that would be pretty nice to have in the build. This is just what ended up happening. Recombinated some shitty frostbite rings with some other random rings, and got a very nice frostbite dex stack ring. So you can just do that by the underground, which is the delve fossil, not fossil, just the delve mod that people can find from certain delve nodes. That means that you can then recombinate it onto regular rings, whereas if you have like a redeemer ring, that makes it a bit more complicated. Then just bought some sort of huge resist ring because I really needed resists. Recombinated a few times for some random gloves. Nothing too special ended up happening, but it's just temple, dex, and life, and then I crafted a suffix. We then got dex implicit belt, used some essences, hit that. Likewise with this dex implicit, except I think I used fundamental fossils for this. Does feel pretty good using fundamental fossils for amulets if you need lots of stats, because it rolls lots of stats pretty much every time. Otherwise you could do essences, but I did try that and I like this a bit more. And then just fractal thoughts with the blade trap thing. So overall the character's worth probably like 20 to 25x or some shit, and I don't feel like I got 20 to 25x worth of output in it, though the single target on certain boss fights did look pretty cool. I think it's probably better to chuck this type of a setup onto the spectral throw character, or maybe invest that much into an explosive trapper or like a seismic trapper. Probably have just much better output. Don't know if it's blade trap itself, if I'm building it a little bit inefficient, or maybe it's like better for poison or some shit. Ultimately, I don't think I was that happy with the results for this, but I'll let you be the judge of what you want to play. So what we've got here is just divergent blade trap, cluster traps, trap in mine, life tap, so I had to fix mana somehow basically, cold pen and LE damage. So cluster trap lets you throw out more traps at a time, but using swift assembly is a bit more RNG and more damage potential. So I think the biggest boss kill clips I just then showed was when you can pre-fire a boss and you can actually just stack up using this, because you can still get to your max stacks of traps before anything happens, but it won't have this less penalty. That said, during like on the fly attacks and fights and mapping and all that, cluster traps is going to outperform swift assembly, it feels like. Otherwise, I don't know what else there is to mention really. Like fortify, whirling blades, you could occasionally get some fortify thanks to the amount of cold damage we had. Grace, defiance banner, vitality, life tap, hatred, divine blessing, self-casting, assassin's mark as an extra curse, bear trap, flame dash, life tap, and then had skitterbots that also had bone chill and unbound ailments for a really powerful shock and chill that also increased cold damage on the enemy. So that was pretty good technology there. Otherwise, divined brutal restraint for a bunch of dexterity. Nothing too insane happened. Hit 5 dex, life, 5 dex, and 5 dex. But I had to take a node I wasn't planning on taking. So overall ended up going pretty well, but I had to divine this thing like, I don't know, 80 times maybe. I'm then using the Saboteur Explosive Expert. So basically, Saboteur usually has to make a choice between dropping one of these things, but now you can get all of them, and it's basically the cheapest Ascendancy jewels out there, 30C for the combo. So yep, not many of these going around. And also grabbed a Watcher's Eye just for a bit of extra movement speed and cold damage, because movement speed does seem to be what kind of makes the mapping playstyle a little bit nicer. Otherwise, yep, crit and suppress and whatever the fuck, and that's the build. Anything else that I can think of to really mention? This is just what the challenge set looks like. I've been asked many times. You know, you get to 24 challenges, and that's the free set you get. It is a bit harder to get to, you know, this league, but it's quite a bit more rewarding. This is actually just, I think, one of the better sets they've ever put out there, and it's a free one. So with a bit of work, you'll get there, and it's a very nice MTX set to have. I'm just using the scavenger effect on top of it. Otherwise, it looks like that. If you can go all the way for the 38, then I've seen people running around with those. Looks very nice. Going to be quite a bit harder as well. So there it is, Blade Trap. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and whatever the fuck happened in it, if you could tell, because it's a visual nightmare. So thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.